don't have water yet. Okay.
Oh yeah, make sure you're hydrated.
Plenty of water. I'm good.
Wait, hold on. I don't have the background noise on. Turn off the
Spooky
thing.
Spooky ambiance.
Are you getting these lovely backgrounds anyway?
Finding them on YouTube.
Yay!
I was honestly a little curious if you were like asking Midjourney to make something.
No. These things are animated.
Well,
Midjourney can't animate yet.
Not
There
yet,
are
no.
some.
I mean, did you see that American Dad thing that somebody put up today?
Yeah, and that's terrifying.
Yeah, it's capable of animating. Like they did the Secret Invasion opening animation that way, but it looks.
Yes, but literally the point of that is that it was supposed to be off-putting.
Again.
It was supposed to look unnatural and unreal.
Anyway, hi folks.
Oh yes, hello. I guess there are people here.
Hi-ho!
I have a terrifying fact for everyone tonight. Inside your body right now is a skeleton.
Oh my god!
Not mine. I had mine surgically removed.
There we go.
Sounds like you're calcium deficient. Anyway.
So how you doing tonight, chat? Are you ready to get spooked?
We've got something different tonight.
Are you
I
ready
don't
to
know
get
what you're talking
dangerous? Wait, sorry, wrong series. So I think that was...
watch the. Go ahead. Sorry.
No. I watched the what?
The new Goosebumps series that's out apparently.
I haven't seen it yet. No.
I'm vaguely curious, but anyway,
Wasn't aware there was one.
there is. Yeah, that's what most people say. Like, there's a Goosebumps series now.
I mean, I knew there was like an old series from like what mid-90s, late 90s.
That there is. It's on D+, which is probably why like most people haven't seen it. But yeah, I don't know. I don't know the first thing about it, but you know.
It's got it'll give you Gersperms.
Goosebumps.
I was gonna say it probably is gonna go over some of the same Goosebumps stories that are in the published books.
You're giving my Gersperms. Give me the Gersperms.
Have enough people filed in yet?
Well, who are we still waiting for?
Let's see.
Everybody who's reading
we
is in here.
Okay. Well, in that case, then why don't we start reading if everyone who's reading is in here? Who wants to introduce this thing and explain what it is?
Well, I'll let Rick explain what it is, but I'll be the first one speaking when we actually start it.
Okay, this is technically an old fan fiction from 2006 about House of Leaves.
That's right.
Now, it was I found out it existed because of a tweet that was making fun of a Domino's pizza box that says, I finally started reading House of Leaves or something.
Oh yeah, those pizza boxes are very much like that.
Yeah, somebody posted a link to this below it, and it was like, I think I remember this from way back in the old internet.
The old internet.
And it basically disappeared from the internet, so... Somebody saved it on Imager, and I transcribed it, and now we are going to read it to you.
Alright. Submitted for the approval of the Midnight Society. Burning Down the House of Leaves. The Jay's Notes, condensed version of the classic postmodern existentialist horror mystery by Mark Zonko Danielewski.
Copyright 2006 Ian J. This novella seems to have almost disappeared from the internet. But he did write share, don't steal on the last page, so we're sharing in his name. Adapted, somehow, to be read aloud by Rick Griffin.
Hold tight. Wait till the party's over. Hold tight. We're in for nasty weather. Okay. Go ahead.
this is not for you. Seriously, it's a freaky-ass book that made me go all crazy and stuff, and this I can seriously attest to because I am a real person. However, the stuff in this book is probably not real. I, antisocial loner tattoo artist Johnny Truant, lifted it off this old Spanish guy me and my friend Lude found dead in his apartment. The Spanish guy's apartment, not Lude's. And all the people and documents in it are made up. I should know. I checked. Because like I said, the book drove me crazy. Otherwise, I would never even dream of setting foot in a library. I'm too lonely and antisocial for crap like that. Anyways, don't read any further unless you want to get nightmares and stop eating and tack measuring tapes to your wall and freak out the neighbors and lower your credit rating and start smelling like old luncheon meat and develop weird pimply-type thighs all over your thighs and basically turn your life into a waking nightmare. Your curiosity may get the best of you, and you may really, really actually want to read it, but don't! I am not kidding! Whatever you may think, this is definitely not a marketing hook stuck in here by Danielewski to give the book an ooh, creepy edge. So, stop reading. Right now. Seriously. Stop. Now. Right now.
This is a Lemony Snicket. You know, Mark, this seems eerily similar to the don't read this book routine that I used in my series.
Shut up. Just shut up. I'm going to start with the book now.
Chapter 1. What is the Navidson Record? Du hast den Weizenspitzen und Schalehammer, du Kleinsteins und Wissenschaft, du Springer, Franken, Futz und Grammacher, Simon Manstein. Sigmund Freud.
Translation. That'll be the chicken fried steak for my friend here, and the fish taco for me. Hold the onions.
Ever since its first release, countless experts have debated the validity of the Navidson Record, despite the blindingly obvious fact that it's a real movie about something that really happened, obviously. In the space of a few short years, this sparsely released film has inspired an immense quantity of analyses and critiques from the academic community. Lucky for you, dear reader, I'm going to tediously reference them all. Take notes, there will be a quiz on Friday. How the film actually made it to theaters is something of a mystery in itself. The viewing public first caught a glimpse of footage from The Record as a short film, The 5.5-Minute Hallway, which consists of a single continuous 360-degree pan of an average suburban living room. In the room we see light filtering through the Venetian blinds, a TV, a slightly worn couch, and a rather tasteful glass coffee table. At the end of the shot, the camera slowly zooms in on a blank patch of wall. As viewers hold their breath, the camera holds its focus on the wall while maneuvering through a nearby window. Once outside, the shocking truth is revealed. The wall is totally flat, exactly the same as it is on the inside. There's nothing unusual whatsoever about this wall. This leaves a tantalizing cliffhanger for the viewer, as an independent movie critic and 3-time National Water Polo League MVP, Ernest P. Yobgor-Bulvitlington, states, "What, if anything at all, will happen to this wall? We know something must happen to it. Otherwise, this bland little piece of filmmaking wouldn't have such a cult-like fan following. We don't know if it will start to leak water, or develop boils, or grow branches, or even dissolve into a hole in the space-time continuum. But we are excited. We are really, very fantastically ecstatic. We are just on the verge of soiling ourselves in waiting to find out what happens to this wall." Ernest P. Yobgor-Bulvitlington, scared short for Nihilist Twits, Cinemagnifique, October 1981. The footage also holds another mystery. The film only runs for about 1 minute and 37 seconds, and at no point is any part of the house but the living room and exterior wall scene, meaning the name The 5.5-Minute Hallway is something of a misnomer. This is still the subject of heated debate. Another piece of footage, tentatively titled Exploration Number 4, was rumored to be from The Record, but it was lost forever after someone taped a rerun of Sanford and Son over the only surviving copy. It wasn't until 1993 that the entire Navidson Record was released by independent movie distributor Miramax. Its opening weekend brought a total gross of around $17.36, along with 6 Chuck E. Cheese tokens, some half-melted Mike and Ike's, and a bloody molar. But the film continues to be a hit with critics, filmmakers, and general art snots everywhere. At the opening of the film, we meet Will Navidson, an award-winning professional photographer who has taken time off from his busy schedule to settle down in a normal suburban house with his normal suburban family in a normal suburban life. Will wants to enjoy every touching and heartwarming moment of life in his new home, so he does what any rational parent would do. He installs video cameras in every single room of the house and forces each member of his family to make daily video journal entries, including the dog. This appears to work for about 3 months. For the first time, he has ample time to spend with his wife Karen and kids Daisy and Chad, who are slowly growing more and more paranoid from the constant Big Brother-style surveillance, but nevertheless appreciate the sentiment. However, Navidson's normal life rapidly becomes not so normal the day he finds in his living room a door that he has never noticed before. A transcript of the dialogue from the film follows.
Honey, have you ever seen this door here before? Do that again, GC.
Cut out a bit.
You are cutting out so much, GC.
Oh, 1 second. Huh? What door?
This door! This big gray door smack dab in the middle of the living room wall! You know, the one that freezes the fingers and exudes an overwhelming aura of unspeakable menace.
Oh, that's a sewing room, Navi. It's always been there.
Really? Alright.
However, almost immediately after that, Navidson finds another door, and this one leads to an endless labyrinth of cold, identical hallways extending on into infinity. After several minutes of girly screaming, intense meditation, Navidson comes to the conclusion that this strange extension of the house must exist for a reason, and it would have to be properly explored, though certainly not by him. He would need to get some help. Chapter 2. Navidson gets some help. And so it may be that reality, as we perceive it, may be no more than shadows on a cave wall, an assembly of ghosts that parody the world's true forms. But then again, what do I know? I use bedsheets for clothing, for crying out loud. Plato. Luckily, Navidson has contacts through his photography business somehow. He dials up Mark Holloway, famed explorer and all-around manly man, who immediately shows up with a couple of his assistants, Jed Jettersworth and Andrew Wax Anderson. Wax got his nickname after an especially colorful incident in the Himalayas involving 3 empty water balls, a ball of twine, 1 extremely smelly and hideous yak, and 2 Sherpas with a warped sense of humor. Trust me, you do not want to hear the details. Holloway agrees to explore Navidson's house for the sheer thrill of adventure, as well as a possible business partnership deal. Think about it, Navi. You could be sitting on top of the biggest drywall line in the Western Hemisphere. A short time later, the explorers are ready to go, armed with 8 miles of fishing wire, 20 regular intensity flares, 8 high intensity flares, 14 rolls of neon tape, 6 pairs of clean underpants, and an immense quantity of teriyaki-style venison jerky, a food Holloway was known to subsist almost exclusively on, sometimes consuming 2/3 of his weight of jerky in one sitting. Also included in the excursion party's supply is 1 radio, which, in the grand tradition of all adventure survival movies, will fade out of range and prove absolutely useless about 5 seconds into the labyrinth. Their loins now sufficiently girded, Holloway and his team march bravely through the mysterious door. Little did they know that only one of them would be coming out alive. Oh, foreshadowing! Navidson spends the next few hours anxiously waiting for Holloway's return, along with his stoner brother Tom and his handicapped yet inspirational best friend Billy Reston, played by a special guest Morgan Freeman. Navidson edits these sequences beautifully, shifting from face to face to the occasional shot of the static spewing radio to the ashy gray door that looms ominously over the whole proceedings. Still, nothing much actually happens in the movie for a good 45 minutes, so most critics agreeing on things, 3rd edition Random House, 1996, that this is a good time to get up, stretch, take a pee, maybe go to the concession stand and buy a $4 box of Junior Mints and one of those gigantic oil tanker-sized buckets of Coke, stretch again, and maybe play a couple of games of Daytona 500 in the theater arcade before sitting back down again. Go ahead. No one's looking.
Footnote. Oddly enough, the Spanish guy seems to go off on a tangent here. How would he know about movie theaters? Wasn't he blind? Did I forget to mention he was blind? Because he was. Come to think of it, how would a blind person be able to see a movie? Is there some sort of mysterious symbolic meaning behind this, or did Danielewski just slip and leave a ridiculous gaping hole in the plot? The only clue I found is that every game of Daytona 500 in every movie theater in East LA has a high score by someone named ZPO. Weird. Stoker footnote, by the way, there are multiple ways that blind people can see movies, including descriptive audio. Resuming the story.
Chapter 3. OMG! Exclamation point, exclamation point, exclamation point, 1! Exclamation point, exclamation point. Suddenly, without warning, a voice squawked to the radio. This, followed by the rat-a-tat of Holloway's signature Glock semi-automatic, the sound seeming to emanate from somewhere within the house's walls. Navidson, as well as everyone else in the room, is stunned. A transcript of the dialogue follows.
Huh. Well, I'm stunned.
So are
we.
So are we.
Well, you all know what we have to do now.
Go in there and find out what Holloway is fighting?
What? Oh, good lord, no. I was suggesting we pack up and move to Australia.
Well, you do have to go in there eventually.
Do I have to? Karen, why don't you go instead?
Sorry, Navi. Somebody's got to watch the kids. Besides, I've been afraid of dark, cramped, cold areas since I accidentally shut myself in the refrigerator when I was 5. Turns out the light really does go out when you close the door.
All right, then. Billy, what about you?
Navi, looking back on my life, I realize that this is only one of a number of journeys that I've embarked upon. Only one of a multitude of different paths that I have wandered. I'm not sure where this new voyage will take me, whether it will be physical, mental, or even spiritual. But I do know that my past journeys, as painful as they may have been at times, have ultimately made me the man I am today.
Great. So you can go in there and we'll stay out here.
What? Oh, no. Hell no, that door gives me the creeps.
Dang. Well, looks like it's down to you, Tom.
Navy is your house. You have to investigate it. Not us. You.
Do I really, really, really have to?
Yes.
Yes.
Alright, but only if Billy and Tom go with me, for protection.
Oh.
The 3 acquaintances turned adventurers, their supplies loaded up onto a wagon, tied onto the back of Chad's BMX bike, borrowed by Tom, in case I find any sweet jumps, cautiously reached for the door. That's the door of the linens closet, Navi. I knew that. And entered the maze. This sequence is filmed on Navison's personal handheld Hi8 camcorder, a very special model that, strangely enough, never seems to run out of film or electrical power, ever. Navison has claimed that this is due to a mystical spell placed upon it by an old witch he met in the Balkans in 1988, but most critics dismiss this phenomena as simply another gaping plot hole. Footnote: man, these are getting pretty frequent, aren't they? You'd think that after working on this thing for 10 years, Mark would at least have the sense to proofread his work. As the search party probes deeper and deeper into the labyrinth, they start to notice a few things, or rather, the absence of them. Other than its distinctly unheimlich atmosphere, this area of the house has no outstanding features whatsoever. It consists entirely of empty rooms and corridors.
Footnote: I couldn't really find out what this unheimlich means. I mean, I know it's German, but I kind of got sidetracked while trying to research its translation. See, I was in the library trying to find a German to English dictionary when suddenly out of the corner of my eye I spotted a girl who looked familiar, engrossed in the volume of Proust. I introduced myself, told her why I was puzzled, and soon a closer inspection of the freckle pattern on her left her left calf, revealed the reason why she had rung the proverbial bell in my memory. She was the second cousin of the daughter of the stepdad of the brother of the kid who used to sit in front of me in my 3rd grade English class. Sure enough, 2 minutes later, we were getting 18 kinds of nasty right there in the middle of the reference section, soon joined by a couple of librarians and a surprisingly limber custodian. Eventually, random people off the street just jumped in, and I was caught in the middle of this wild, crazy, all-out library sex orgy well into the night. God, my life is miserable.
Footnote: unheimlich. Choking not permitted. Editor.
All the walls, ceilings, and floors are the same monotonous shade of ashy gray as the living room door. Likewise, any outside or inside sounds are non-existent, and the maze is quiet as probably much quieter than in fact a crypt, save for an occasional distant rumbling growl. Any evidence of the hallway team has been erased, save for a few mangled bits of neon tape hanging off a wall and the torn-up remnants of an empty bag of jerky. Other than that, the dark rooms of the labyrinth seem to hold only one thing, and that is nothing. Footnote: diligent researchers of the record have found that this area of the house is not only devoid of windows, light fixtures, and electrical outlets, but also does not contain Allan wrenches, dribble feeders, toilet seats, electric heaters, trash compactors, juice extractors, shower rods and water meters, walkie-talkies, picture hangers, paper cutters, waffle irons, window shutters, paint removers, window louvers, masking tape and plastic gutters, kitten swats, folding tables, weather stripping, dumper kibbles, hook and tackle, grout and spackle, power foggers, sleeves and ladles, pesticide fumigation, high-performance lubrication, metal roofing, waterproofing, multi-purpose insulation, air compressors, back testing, wrecking chisels, smoke detectors, tire gauges, hamster gauges, thermostats and bug deflectors, trailer hitch magnetizers, automatic circumcisers, tennis rackets, angle brackets, Duracells and energizers, soffit panels, circuit breakers, vacuum cleaners, coffee makers, calculators, generators, or magic salt and pepper shakers. I can't wait. No, I can't wait. When are they going to open up that door?
I'm going. Yes, I'm going to. Anyway, sorry.
Eventually, the group begins to discover that the house, in fact, is much bigger than they ever could have imagined. After passing through a chamber that's easily the size of a football stadium, the big room, Navidson and Reston find themselves in an even larger room, the really big room. After a long hike through that room, they find themselves in an even larger room, the really, really big room. On the other side of which they find a room that is just too freaking large for rational comparison. The okay, now you're just being ridiculous room. It is Tom who first finds the gigantic spiral staircase in the middle of the room, winding its way down towards eternity. The staircase defies rational comprehension. While it is made of the same gray material as the rest of this area of the house, its size is immense. Its diameter is something approximating that of the alien mothership from the movie Independence Day. However, no one in the search party could make this comparison as Independence Day had not actually been made yet, and its depth is impossible to determine. Tom drops a coin into the hole, and the group waits a full 10 minutes for it to hit bottom. Finally, at the edge of hearing, a ping echoes back, followed by a voice from below. Hey look, a nickel! The voice is unmistakably Holloway's. A transcript of the dialogue follows.
My God, that sounds like Holloway. He's still alive down there. We've got to get him out of this place.
But how are we gonna get to him down there if we're up here?
Easy. We'll just climb down.
Shifts in wheelchair and affixes Navidson with a hard stare.
Oh.
Well, we could always take the elevator.
Tom points to a pair of lit-up metal doors set in a far wall. Once the search party arrives at the doors, Navidson punches the call button, and after a substantial wait, the doors open with a faint ding. As the group steps in, the camera begins a moderately slow pan around the faux wood paneled interior of the elevator, before stopping and lingering on the elevator's button panel, which is punctuated by only two buttons, down and down-er. A hidden speaker softly plays a light, jazzy rendition of The Girl from Ipanema. The doors close, Billy Reston presses down-er, and the elevator cab begins to creak downwards. What follows is a scene many consider the greatest and purest scene of documentary filmmaking. A transcript of the dialogue follows.
Whew! Who cut a ripe one?
Wasn't me. Must have been Tom.
What?
Jeez, Tom, couldn't it wait until after we get off?
But I didn't do it. I can't even smell nothing.
Sure, right, sure. Of course you didn't.
Oh, crap.
Hey!
There are a myriad of different interpretations for this certain scene, but the three most common are the Lansbury-Weterhoff postulate, the Allen's-Karanopoulos-Mirsky conjugate, and the Milanovich-Forsyth-Presley-Quimbleton-Thorwick-Cheese theorem. Cheese! The Lansbury-Weterhoff postulate essentially claims that whoever smelt it dealt it, and that therefore Navidson must have been responsible for the unfortunate trouser cough. Footnote: optical illusions. That's illusions with an A. The interconnectedness of meta-conceptual variables in popular culture, Scientific Armenian, Volume 138, February 1994, pages 95 through 101. However, the slightly more respected Allan's Karenopoulos Mirsky conjugate overturns this, noting that whoever deduced it produced it, and pointing to Billy Reston as the culprit. Footnote: the Navidson Record Subtext Analysis Super Holiday Extravaganza, The New Amsterdamer, Volume 203, December 1994, page 82, near the bottom next to the Clearasil ad. The prestigious and extremely fancy-sounding Milanovich, Forsyth, Presley, Quimbleton, Thorwick Chase theorem finally put the debate to rest, for now at least, by stating that the true leaker of noxious butt aromas was indeed Tom. Since he strongly denied it, he truly supplied it. It goes on to note that Tom is probably the safest character to pin this on because he's more of the comic relief to Navidson's hero and Billy Reston's handicapped yet inspirational mentor, played by Morgan Freeman characters. Plus, he's a dang stoner. So there. Footnote: Conference of World Genius Expert Gentlemen, August 1995. The research paper was initially read aloud at said conference, and while copious notes were taken on it and released to a variety of audiences, the actual paper itself seems to have been lost to the general public. A full edition, complete with notes and appendices, is planned to be released by Circle Snake Publications sometime next spring. When the elevator doors finally open, the search party is greeted by Jed Jettersworth, clasping onto the mangled, near-lifeless body of Andrew Wax Anderson. "It was horrible," Jed says in a cracked, worn voice. His eyes look like the eyes of the last standing soldier in a losing battle, the eyes of a man who has seen too much. He just kept getting angrier and angrier for some reason. I think it was because there wasn't anything to find, wasn't anything to conquer. It messed with his whole explorer mindset. We were running low on food, low on water, and very low on sleep. Time doesn't seem to work right down here. It wasn't long before he what? Asks Navidson. He snapped, tried to kill us. Wax is unconscious right now. He's got a couple of bullets lodged in his shoulder. Plus, Holloway bit him on the forehead a couple of times. I think he thought Wax was a giant piece of jerky or something. "Don't worry, you're going to be all right. We'll take you guys back up with us," says Reston in a calm, steady tone. Jed appears to calm down somewhat. "Thank God," whispers Jed, which is kind of ironic because just after that, Jed's head explodes like a filthy piñata. "Oh, gross," exclaims Navidson. "All over my new sweater, too. I was going to wear this to Karen's office picnic next week. Say, you guys wouldn't happen to have any paper towels or wet ones or anything on you, would you?" "Damn it, Navi, this is no time to worry about your sweater. We've got to get Wax out of here," Reston cries, and hits the elevator call button. The door opens and light floods the room. Navidson and Tom drag Wax into the elevator, but before Reston can roll in, a bullet zings to the opposite hallway. Holloway, now naked, bloody, and crazy as hell, bursts into the room, screams something to the effect of Footnote: of course, not all critics agree on the true meaning of this, and opens up fire with his Glock. Reston, with almost superhuman reflexes, propels himself back into the elevator. He pulls a pineapple grenade seemingly from nowhere, yanks out the pin with his teeth, lobs the explosive at Holloway, and jabs at the closed door button on the elevator control panel. The door is shut, and the elevator begins to creak upward just as a dull boom is heard. "Holy freaking mother of crap, Billy," exclaims Navidson. "Where did you get the hand grenade?" Reston blinks. "Oh, I always carry one around, for luck. Doesn't everybody?" The ride back up seems unusually long, but the search party concentrates on staying alert. To pass the time, Reston gets out a keyboard and plays a medley of his more R&B funk hits, including "Will He Go Round in Circles" and "Something from Nothing Leaves Nothing." Footnote: maybe I'm thinking of Billy Preston, in which case, never mind. When the elevator opens again, the group finds themselves not in the familiar maze of gray corridors that they started in, but in Navidson's laundry room. Navidson dashes upstairs into the master bedroom, where Karen appears to be practicing her smile in the mirror.
"Oh, Karen! Thank God you're all right!"
Hey, you're back, sweetie. Do I have something stuck in my teeth? Because I ate some popcorn, and ever since then, it feels like I had a piece of kernel or something stuck between my two front.
"There's no time for corn, woman! We've got to get out of this house, or we're all gonna go crazy!"
No time for corn. I am your wife. We're gonna get as much corn as I ever want. Well, yeah, I mean, look what it did to you.
Hey, wait a minute.
Suddenly, the ceiling starts to tremble and the floor starts to shake. The paint on the walls turns from white to that ominous ashy gray, and the whole house is filled with a deafening growl. Navidson grabs Karen's wrist, and together they rush down the rapidly narrowing hallway to Daisy's bedroom, where they find her vigorously typing away on her Dell notebook.
Oh, Daisy, thank God you're all right.
Didn't we do this scene already? Dad, how many times do I have to tell you? Don't come into my room without knocking.
Honey, we need to leave the house now.
But I'm not done angsting about you on my live journal. Give me a minute.
Listen, if we don't get out of here, there won't even be anything left of us to angst about. Now, where's your brother?
Gee, I don't know. I left him off his leash about an hour ago. He just ran off.
Never mind, let's go.
Yeah.
The three rush downstairs to the living room, which is rapidly getting shallower and wider. Tom rushes in and yells, "I can't find Chad anywhere! Neither can I!" hollers Navidson. Karen and Daisy dash out the door to where Reston is waiting with his family's minivan. But before Tom and Navidson can make it, the floor drops out of the room. Navidson is left gripping onto the front door's handle for dear life, with Tom clinging to his other hand.
Oh, snap.
Navy, if we both swing around, I bet I can get the door to move closer to the doorway. And if we can climb up and out onto the porch.
Are you out of your mind? This door isn't gonna hold the both of us. The door creeps, and the top hinge pops off. There, see?
But I think if we swing at the same time, we can both...
No, that can't possibly work. Sorry about this.
Jonas.
Okay.
No.
It's your part is supposed to be Navidson lets go of Tom's hand.
Oh, that's right. That's me. That's right. That's me. Navidson lets go of Tom's hand.
You bastard!
Cookies. Navidson, sure enough, then swings on the door and climbs effortlessly onto the front porch. Karen, Daisy, and Reston are already in the van when he hops onto the driver's seat and fires the ignition.
Sweetie, what happened to Tom?
He...
Everyone in the car turns to stare at Navidson.
slipped. He slipped. That was it.
Right.
What? Anyway, he was a stoner, so he deserved it.
Yeah,
Good point.
sure drank a lot too. What a creep.
Chad jumps up from the trunk.
Hi guys, what's going on? Are we getting ice cream?
Where the heck were you?
Oh, in here, hiding for the last 5 hours.
Why?
Cause I'm a ninja, goddammit.
The last shot in this sequence is of the Navidson family living out of a Quality Inn hotel room. Not far, but still far enough from the house on Ashtree Lane. This provides the viewer with a poignant comment on the strength of family ties. Even though they are homeless and thoroughly traumatized, the Navidsons still move on with their lives. As Navidson says just before fade to black, well, things can't possibly get any worse, can they? Chapter 4. Ha ha. Boy, was he wrong. Going back to Houston and do the hot dog dance. Going back to Houston to get me some pants back.
My favorite Beck song.
Many people argue that this point should have been the end of the film. It is about 1 hour and 45 minutes into the movie, a nice taut running time for a documentary, and provides a general, if not entirely complete, sense of closure, which makes Navidson's solo return to the house all the more mysterious. Some argue that Navidson originally intended the final expedition to be released as a second film, tentatively titled The Navidson Record 2, Death Has a Mailing Address, but distribution and budget problems caused the film to be released as one 2.5 hour long bladder destroyer. Footnote, Reginald and Lucinda we're arguing about things in New York, LOL, that is just so random house.
God, this thing complaining about 2.5 hour of the movie, and I just think of like the Avengers and Star Wars movies that have come out in the last 5 years.
Don't get me started.
Scorsese has a 3.5 hour movie out right now.
This theory has not been verified by Miramax, but is still widely accepted, mostly for lack of a better explanation. We all know Navidson was weirded out, to say the least, by the house, and that the house itself didn't seem to like him. So why did he do something as undeniably inexplicable as to return to walk the halls that shook up his quiet life, that killed his brother no less? For any number of reasons, or perhaps even for none, we are presented at the start of this scene with a steady shot, presumably on a tripod, of Navidson in the house's living room, suited up for his last journey through the maze. Next to him is Chad's BMX bike, miraculously recovered without a scratch, and a large pack filled with various supplies. The rest of the room is totally bare, lacking carpets, furniture, or even so much as a death bunny. Navidson addresses the camera while mounting up on the bike.
Captain's log. Stardate 431.27. My mission, to seek out and explore new levels of creepiness. To push the boundary of psychological freakitude, to boldly go where no paranoid, award-winning freelance photographer has gone before. This is House Trek.
That was
then-
beautiful, Rick.
That certainly was the most. He then mounts up on the bike, grabs the camera, and starts pedaling. The bike hurtles through the doorway and straight into the kitchen pantry. Grumbling, knocking over several cans of Campbell's cream and mushroom soup, Navidson turns the bike around, aims for the other doorway, and starts pedaling again. This time he's got it right, and he begins to fly through the maze. Surprisingly, the serpentine passages of the labyrinth present no problem whatsoever for the bike. The turns are smoother than last time, the walls are farther away, and no matter which way Navidson points, the bike seems to roll downhill. Footnote, eventually Navidson realized this. On one of his breaks, he tests the all-downhill phenomenon by taking a slinky out of his pack and placing it on the ground. Sure enough, it does not sit there for even half a second before lazily walking end over end down the hallway, its shunk, shunk sound echoing into the darkness. Experts disagree why Navidson was carrying a slinky with him, but they all agree without exception on one thing: slinkies are cool. On the whole, Navidson is moving at a pretty steady clip every day, approximately 17 hours give or take, though there is no sign of time passing in the maze. Navidson travels approximately 300 billion jillion miles, according to his own estimate. Footnote, accuracy not confirmed. After a while, something strange happens. The walls begin to close in with each new mile Navidson travels, and change from gray into a bland, sickly beige. The floor, too, is now covered in equally bland and sickly brown carpet tiles, and the ceiling is replaced by white acoustical tile, punctured every so often by fluorescent lights. Soon the walls have disconnected completely from the ceiling and are at about shoulder height with Navidson. Occasionally, the camera zooms in and focuses on one of the many odd trinkets and gewgaws placed carefully on top of the walls: plastic troll dolls, Pez dispensers, cheap day-to-day calendars, coffee mugs, countdown to retirement clocks, and the occasional photograph of somebody's cat. Navidson only stops rolling when he runs into a pair of large white metal and plastic boxes, which immediately tip over and splatter hot pocket remnants all over the surrounding area. A shaggy-haired head attached to an awkward-looking teenager pokes out of the nearest beige room and exclaims, "What the heck are you doing here?" A further transcript of the dialogue follows.
What? Who are you? How did you get down here?
This is where I work. Anyways, I asked first. How'd you get here?
What do you mean?
What do you mean? What do I mean? I was just writing about you, and suddenly you crashed right into the microwave and mini fridge. Alfie is going to be tickled out that it will repay to my cubicle with her lunch.
Writing about me?
I've been writing this story in my spare time here. It's kind of a stupid parody of a book that my friend Joe recommended to me. I've been working on it for ages.
So basically what you're saying is that I'm a fictional character in a parody of a book written by some idiot kid with a third-grade sense of humor.
Well, yeah, I'm Jonas, didn't you tell? I couldn't resist. The book was just too convoluted and pretentious not to make fun of. Besides, it's not like any of these things are interesting to do around here.
This explains a fart joke back in the elevator. So, how exactly is this possible? Me meeting you here, I mean.
Oh, Mark, does this sort of fourth-wall breaking crap all the time in the original book? Here, check it out!
He pulls out a thick, slightly battered blue novel off a shelf in his cubicle. The cover reads House of Leaves by Mark Z. Danielewski.
Oh, thanks. The only book I brought with me was Beatnik Rutabagas from Beyond the Stars.
Oh man, I would so trade you for that.
They swap books. Navidson gets back on his bike and starts pedaling.
Later, dude. Keep your wits sharp, your head cool, whatever. Nothing's as it seems in this place.
He goes too distant here. Soon, the walls, ceiling, and floor revert to their original ashy gray colors, and Navidson is left biking towards who knows where. Soon the hallway grows bigger and bigger and bigger and bigger and bigger and bigger and bigger until Navidson is biking on a great featureless plateau devoid of any sort of landmark. Footnote: dang, this sure is a great way to increase page count, isn't it? More pages mean more relevance in terms of literature. Whoever said that brevity of the soul of wit can suck it.
Footnote. It's true, the guy has a point. Think about it. Which is regarded more as a classic of Western literature? War and Peace, or The Very Hungry Caterpillar? Obviously the former, even though thousands of more have read the latter. More pages equal more academic clout. In fact, I'll bet Danielewski will stick some sort of ridiculous appendix or something onto the end of this, full of irrelevant information, just to make it look longer and more important.
Nevertheless, after some time, Navidson screeches to a halt, an abrupt halt, as he reaches that he is dangling on the edge of an immense yawning crevasse. To his right, he finds a small shack, no bigger than an outhouse, and made of the same gray material as the rest of the maze. Inside, he finds another spiral staircase, this one much smaller than the one he found earlier, that has an axis extending directly outward over the chasm. Navidson can go no further, so instead he spends the night sitting in the shack, cramped and freezing. The next morning, as much as morning is relevant here, which isn't very much, Navidson wakes up to find that the staircase is now on the ceiling and points upward. It is now the only way out of the shack. Navidson hoists himself up on the first stair, but as he does so, the bottom drops out of the shack and all supplies go with it. Most critics agree that at this point, Navidson has placed himself in a situation generally known by movie experts as screwed. Nevertheless, he starts to climb up the winding staircase. The staircase leads him to a ladder, which quickly turns into a tube leading to a short drop, in which another ladder resides, after which a long, tight passage is found, which immediately leads Navidson directly down another tube and straight into a big pit of brightly colored plastic balls. Suddenly, Navidson notices that the room, unlike most others in the labyrinth, is not completely dark. There seems to be a softly blinking light coming from the next room. He stands up, wades through the ball pit, and enters the adjoining chamber. He can hardly believe his eyes. The camera shakes slightly in his hands as he heads towards what may be his only salvation. Set into the far wall of the room is an open window. Above the window is an enormous neon sign that says in the yard-high letters, "This is it! The exit you've been looking for! Congratulations, hardy traveler! Seriously, we ain't kidding. Come on in!" Navidson runs toward the window, but pauses when he reaches it. Was it really the exit, or just some sort of bizarre trap? Still, it isn't like there's anywhere else to go. He takes a deep breath and squeezes through the open window, only to be met on the other side by a sheer, endless drop. A transcript of the dialogue follows.
To completely censor this.
Man, that was stupid.
Eventually, Navidson realizes that screaming during an impossibly long fall didn't help Bill and Ted in Bill and Ted's Bogus Journey, and it won't help him here. He tells the camera...
I unmuted the stream for a second to see what it sounded like on Twitch's head. Whew, you were clipping your mic something fierce. Ow!
Nice. And it won't help him here. He tells the camera that I'll probably be here for a while, and so to pass the time, he takes the book the teenager gave him, House of Leaves, out of his pocket. Lighting a match, he begins to read.
Ha! Johnny Truant, eh? There's a fake name if I ever heard one. What's with all the different fonts and stuff in here? Why do we need all these little footnotes and things? Jesus, is this some of the stuff written upside down? Is this guy Mark trying to be witty, or is he just trying to freak me out? Either way, it's annoying.
Eventually, Navidson runs out of matches. He begins to burn previous pages of the book for light, the ashes slowly floating up and away from him.
Why does this Zampano guy seem to be so shy about all the action in the plot? If something happens, just come right out and say it. Don't dance around the subject and go off on some ridiculous academic tangent, or focus on one of the minor characters. I mean, I'm all for suspense in books, but that's just lame. Now, are we supposed to feel sorry for this Johnny kid? I mean, it's just a book, man. Lighten up. So what if the movie isn't real? Lots of books aren't real. Nobody goes shizzo over them. It's called fiction. Jeez, Book Me, why don't you call the cops? Why don't you call CNN? You could be famous for this, real famous, instead of being some whiskery loser with weird art house documentary. What's with the whole Minotaur obsession? Every time somebody mentions it, it's scratched out in red, but it only draws more attention to it. Maybe Johnny turned into the Minotaur or something. Whatever. I haven't seen any Minotaur anywhere in the house. I'll say it again. Minotaur, Minotaur, Minotaur. How long does this go on for? 600 pages? Good grief. Oh, here's Johnny Looney Tunes mom talking to us. She sounds like one of those mothers who comments repeatedly at every PTA meeting and goes on into dressing rooms at JCPenney's with their kids, calls their kids Sweetie Pumpkin Angel drawers in front of all their friends. Overprotective, you know. I mean, I'm all for having vested interest in my kids' lives, but I don't try to stifle them. I really don't choke them after I accidentally drop Mazzola all over them. Come on, are you stupid as well as crazy? Call 911 or something! Look, I'm sorry, but I can't just identify with any of these characters at all. They don't seem to have any sort of logic or emotion in their actions. They don't think twice, they're just a means to an end. And that's something that really bugs me, when authors don't...
Suddenly, Navidson lands flat on a hard, cold stone floor. Surprisingly, his body seems largely unharmed, though incessant giggling fills his ears as he returns to full consciousness. Navidson rolls over and looks up to find a tall, skinny man standing over him with a glittering waistcoat, Van de Graaff generator-styled hair, and tight pants. A transcript of the dialogue follows.
Well, Mr. Navidson. Looks like you finally made it to the middle of my labyrinth, though too late, I might add.
Oh my god, it's David Bowie!
No, why does everyone say that? I am Jareth, the Goblin King. I own this labyrinth and all the lands within its walls, and you are sitting in my throne room, so I suggest you learn some manners.
All the goblins in the room, an enormous crowd of goblins, scampering around on the floor, jumping on chairs, hanging off of light fixtures, laugh uproariously.
What? How did you get into my house? And what's with all the Muppets?
They're goblins, you wanker. And I've been here much longer than you have. Your house, blue text, is mine, and now your brother is mine as well.
My brother is alive? Where is he?
Oh yes, he is alive and well. I've been spending some real quality time with your dear little Toby.
Tom. His name is Tom.
Right. Bring him out, minions.
4 short goblins with bug eyes and enormous noses carry out a large wicker cage. Tom, dirty and scared, crouches inside.
You remember the agreement, of course. 13 hours to make your way through my labyrinth. If you get through in time, you get to keep your little Tom. But you didn't make it in time, Mr. Navidson, and now I'm going to turn your brother into a goblin.
All the goblins in the room laugh and cheer. One of them falls off the chandelier in the middle of the room and whacks Navidson on the small of the back.
Oh, right. As if you don't have enough goblins around here.
Don't question my motives, Mr. Navidson. I'm likely to get perturbed.
Don't get him angry, Navidson. He is off his rocker. He made me listen to Dance Magic Dance 47 times in a row. Now everything reminds me of the babe.
What babe?
No!
Enough dilly-dallying.
He holds up a glass orb, which immediately starts to glow with eldritch power.
Don't worry, Mr. Navidson. After I finish with Tom, I might turn you into a goblin as well. Either way, you'll have to adapt to some very significant lifestyle changes.
Changes?
I'm going to pretend I didn't hear that.
Navy!
Jareth releases the orb, and it starts hovering in midair, slowly floating towards Tom. The lights darken, and the room is filled with a low rumbling.
Tell my wife I love her.
You don't have a wife, Tom.
Well, then tell your wife I loved her. In a strictly non-romantic and platonic way, of course.
The noise is deafening. By now, everyone in the room has to scream to make themselves heard.
Whatever! We're both dead unless we can get some sort of Deus Ex Machina!
What? What?
No, don't say it again, you'll only summon it.
I said we're both dead unless we get some sort of Deus Ex Machina! Tom?
One more time?
A Deus Ex Mach...
Suddenly, without warning, a space shuttle crashes through the roof of the throne room, crushing Jareth under its nose. A hatch opens on the side of the shuttle, and Karen climbs out, followed by Chad, Daisy, and Billy Reston, now sporting a pair of gleaming bionic transformer legs. They spring Tom from his cage and embrace the two men. "How did you guys get here?" says Navidson. "It's kind of a long story," replies Karen. "For now, let's just get out of this crazy house." And so they do. It is here that the movie ends, but not the controversy. What happened to the house on Ash Tree Lane? Some suspect it was bulldozed in 1998 to make way for a Walmart supercenter. Some think that it never existed, that it was only so much Hollywood smoke and mirrors, with the low budget accounting for the barrenness of the settings. But if you still believe that it's out there somewhere, its rooms empty, its doors locked, and its windows dark, like hollow, black eyes that stare into the souls of passers-by, or like mouths open and waiting to swallow them up. Anyways, pretty good movie. Drags a bit, and some of the dialogue isn't that great, but it ain't a bad way to spend an evening. I give it a 3 out of 5.
Footnote. Told you that you would go crazy. I should know. I went crazy a whole lot. And I said goodbye to my stripper girlfriend, only she wasn't really my girlfriend. And then I went on a bus ride, and I killed a guy, only maybe I didn't. And I met some kids in a band, and they gave me this book, and then I stayed with the doctor, only maybe I didn't either. And then I went to my old house, blue text, where my crazy Marine foster dad Raymond used to beat the crap out of me because I kept eating his fishing flies. And then I went to the loony bin where my mom used to stay, and oh wow, there's no place like home.
Footnote. Yeah, just ignore him. Editor.
The end.
And then there's 4 blank pages. I don't know if that's part of the transcription process, or it just has 4 blank pages at the end. I could totally believe that was intentional.
Weird. That was not intentional, but it fits.
This is the part where you claim that it is actually intentional, Rick.
Part of the story.
He's just like, oh, I don't even have to write a thing on each page. I can just add pages to this.
Suggestion: could a link be provided to chat for all stories featured in case anyone wants to read along? Yeah, that was something that we did last year, and we've totally forgotten to do this year.
Dude, we dropped the ball.
We dropped the ball on my foot.
We're awesome.
Anyway,
Very silly.
this was extraordinarily silly. Good choice. Who chose this one? Was this your choice, Rick?
Yeah, I chose it for Jonas to read.
Well done. Yeah, no, that was fun.
So, I know what you plan for the finale of this, Rick. Do we have time to squeeze in Federick's choice that I was supposed to read?
If you do, I will just have to bump everything to tomorrow. So I guess we could do that.
Well, how many stories are left to be read? Just yours, or are there others?
Just mine.
Okay. Do you want to do that, or would you rather start yours tonight?
I'm good either way. I mean, What do you want to do?
I asked you for no.
I don't know. What do you want to do?
I feel like we could squeeze this one in, and then yours is long enough that it could take up like all of one stream. So,
yeah.
So why not just do this one, because I know this one won't take up the entirety of the rest of the stream.
Okay.
All right, I will, as suggested, provide the text of the story for everyone. This is a one that y'all should all know, at least by the title, if nothing else, and it's rather relevant because there's a Netflix series bearing the same title, and as far as I know, having almost nothing to do with it otherwise. Submitted for the approval of the Midnight Society, this is Edgar Allan Poe's The Fall of the House of Usher. Not to be confused with The Fall of the House of Pancakes. This begins with a quote in, I believe, French or Latin or something like that. I'm just going to skip it. During the whole of a dull, dark, and soundless day in the autumn of the year, when the clouds hung oppressively low in the heavens, I had been passing alone on horseback through a singularly dreary tract of country, and at length found myself, as the shades of the evening drew on, within view of the melancholy house of Usher. I know not how it was, but with the first glimpse of the building, a sense of insufferable gloom pervaded my spirit. I say insufferable, for the feeling was unrelieved by any of that half-pleasurable because poetic sentiment, with which the mind usually receives even the sturdest natural images of the desolate or terrible. I looked upon the scene before me, upon the mere house and the simple landscape features of the domain, upon the bleak walls, upon the vacant eye-like windows, upon a few rank sedges, and upon a few white trunks of decayed trees, with an utter depression of soul which I can compare to no earthly sensation more properly than to the after-dream of the reveler upon opium. The bitter lapse into everyday life, the hideous dropping off of the veil. There was an iciness, a sinking, a sickening of the heart, an unredeemed dreariness of thought which no goading of the imagination could torture into aught of the sublime. What was it, I paused to think, what was it that so unnerved me in the contemplation of the house of Usher? It was a mystery all insoluble, nor could I grapple with the shadowy fancies that crowded upon me as I pondered. I was forced to fall back upon the unsatisfactory conclusion that, while beyond doubt there are combinations of very simple natural objects which have the power of thus affecting us, still the analysis of this power lies among considerations beyond our depth. It was possible, I reflected, that a mere different arrangement of the particulars of the scene, of the details of the picture, would be sufficient to modify, or perhaps to annihilate, its capacity for sorrowful impression. And acting upon this idea, I reined my horse to the precipitous brink of a black and lurid tarn that lay in unruffled luster by the dwelling, and gazed down, but with a shudder even more thrilling than before, upon the remodeled and inverted images of the grey sedge and the ghastly tree stems, and the vacant and eye-like windows. Nevertheless, in this mansion of gloom, I now propose to myself a sojourn of some weeks. Its proprietor, Roderick Usher, had been one of my boon companions in boyhood, but many years had elapsed since our last meeting. A letter, however, had lately reached me in a distant part of the country, a letter from him, which in its wildly importunate nature had admitted of no other than a personal reply. The manuscript gave evidence of nervous agitation. The writer spoke of acute bodily illness, of a mental disorder which oppressed him, and of an earnest desire to see me as his best and, indeed, his only personal friend, with a view of attempting, by the cheerfulness of my society, some alleviation of his malady. It was the manner in which all this, and much more, was said. It was the apparent heart that went with his request, which allowed me no room for hesitation, and I accordingly obeyed forthwith what I still consider a very singular summons. Although as boys we had been even intimate associates, yet I really knew little of my friend. His reserve had always been excessive and habitual. I was aware, however, that his very ancient family had been noted, time out of mind, for a peculiar sensibility of temperament, displaying itself through long ages in many works of exalted art and manifested, of late, in repeated deeds of munificent yet unobtrusive charity, as well as in a passionate devotion to the intricacies, perhaps even more than to the orthodox and easily recognizable beauties, of musical science. I had learned, too, the very remarkable fact that the stem of the Usher race, all time-honored as it was, had put forth at no period any enduring branch. In other words, that the entire family lay in the direct line of descent, and had always, with very trifling and very temporary variation, so lain. It was this deficiency, I considered, while running over in thought the perfect keeping of the character of the premises with the accredited character of the people, and while speculating upon the possible influence which the one, in the long lapse of centuries, might have exercised upon the other. It was this deficiency, perhaps of collateral issue, and the consequent undeviating transmission from sire to son of the patrimony with the name, which had at length so identified the two as to merge the original title of the estate in the quaint and equivocal appellation of the House of Usher. An appellation which seemed to include, in the minds of the peasantry who used it, both the family and the family mansion. I have said that the sole effect of my somewhat childish experiment, that of looking down within the tarn, had been to deepen the first singular impression. There can be no doubt that the consciousness of the rapid increase of my superstition, for why should I not so term it, seemed mainly to accelerate the increase itself. Such, I have long known, is the paradoxical law of all sentiments having terror as a basis. And it might have been for this reason only that when I again uplifted my eyes to the house itself, from its image in the pool, there grew in my mind a strange fancy. A fancy so ridiculous indeed that I but mention it to show the vivid force of the sensations which oppressed me. I had so worked upon my imagination as really to believe that about the whole mansion and domain there hung an atmosphere peculiar to themselves and their immediate vicinity. An atmosphere which had no affinity with the air of heaven, but which had reeked up from the decayed trees and the grey wall and the silent tarn, a pestilent and mystic vapor, dull, sluggish, faintly discernible, and leaden-hued. Shaking off from my spirit what must have been a dream, I scanned more narrowly the real aspect of the building. Its principal features seemed to be that of an excessive antiquity. The discoloration of ages had been great. Minute fungi overspread the whole exterior, hanging in a fine tangled webwork from the eaves. Yet all this was apart from any extraordinary dilapidation. No portion of the masonry had fallen, and there appeared to be a wild inconsistency between its still perfect adaptation of parts and the crumbling condition of the individual stones. In this, there was much that reminded me of the specious totality of old woodwork which has rotted for long years in some neglected vault, with no disturbance from the breath of the external air. Beyond this indication of extensive decay, however, the fabric gave little token of instability. Perhaps the eye of a scrutinizing observer might have discovered a barely perceptible fissure, which, extending from the roof of the building in front, made its way down the wall in a zigzag direction, until it became lost in the sullen waters of the tarn. Noticing these things, I rode over a short causeway to the house. A servant in waiting took my horse, and I entered the Gothic archway of the hall. A valet of stealthy step thence conducted me, in silence, through many dark and intricate passages in my progress to the studio of his master. Much that I encountered on the way contributed, I know not how, to heighten the vague sentiments of which I have already spoken. While the objects around me, while the carvings of the ceilings, the somber tapestries of the walls, the ebon blackness of the floors, and the phantasmagoric armorial trophies which rattled as I strode, were but matters to which, or to such as which, I had been accustomed from my infancy. While I hesitated not to acknowledge how familiar was all this, I still wondered to find how unfamiliar were the fancies which ordinary images were stirring up. On one of the staircases I met the physician of the family. His countenance, I thought, wore a mingled expression of low cunning and perplexity. He accosted me with trepidation and passed on. The valet now threw open a door and ushered me into the presence of his master. Ushered me in, see what he did there? The room in which I found myself was very large and lofty. The windows were long, narrow, and pointed, and at so vast a distance from the black oaken floor as to be altogether inaccessible from within. Feeble gleams of encrimsoned light made their way through the trellised panes, and served to render sufficiently distinct the more prominent objects around me. The eye, however, struggled in vain to reach the remoter angles of the chamber, or the recesses of the vaulted and fretted ceiling. Dark draperies hung upon the walls. The general furniture was profuse, comfortless, antique, and tattered. Many books and musical instruments lay scattered about, but failed to give any vitality to the scene. I felt that I breathed an atmosphere of sorrow. An air of stern, deep, and irredeemable gloom hung over and pervaded all. Upon my entrance, Usher rose from a sofa on which he had been lying at full length and greeted me with a vivacious warmth which had much in it, I had first thought, of an overdone cordiality, of the constrained effort of the ennui man of the world. A glance, however, at his countenance convinced me of his perfect sincerity. We sat down, and for some moments, while he spoke not, I gazed upon him with a feeling half of pity, half of awe. Surely, man had never before so terribly altered in so brief a period as had Roderick Usher. It was with difficulty that I could bring myself to admit the identity of the wan being before me with the companion of my early boyhood. Yet the character of his face had been at all times remarkable. A cadaverousness of complexion, an eye large, liquid, and luminous beyond comparison. Lips somewhat thin and very pallid, but of a surpassingly beautiful curve. A nose of a delicate Hebrew model, but with a breadth of nostril unusual in similar formations. A finely molded chin, speaking, in its want of prominence, of a want of moral energy. Hair of a more than web-like softness and tenuity. These features, with an inordinate expansion above the regions of his temple, made up altogether a countenance not easily to be forgotten. And now, in the mere exaggeration of the prevailing character of these features, and of the expression they were wont to convey, lay so much of change that I doubted to whom I spoke. The now ghastly pallor of the skin, and the now miraculous luster of the eye, above all things startled and even awed me. The silken hair, too, had been suffered to grow all unheeded, and as, in its wild gossamer texture, it floated rather than fell about the face. I could not, even with effort, connect its arabesque expression with any idea of simple humanity. In the manner of my friend, I was at once struck with an incoherence, an inconsistency, and I soon found this to arise from a series of feeble and futile struggles to overcome an habitual trepidancy and excessive nervous agitation. For something of this nature I had indeed been prepared, no less by his letter than by reminiscences of certain boyish traits and by conclusions deduced from his peculiar physical conformation and temperament. His action was alternately vivacious and sullen. His voice varied rapidly from a tremulous indecision, when the animal spirit seemed utterly in abeyance, to that species of energetic concision that abrupt, weighty, unhurried, and hollow-sounding enunciation, that leaden, self-balanced, and perfectly modulated guttural utterance, which may be observed in the lost drunkard, or the irreclaimable eater of opium, during the periods of his most intense excitement. It was thus that he spoke of the object of my visit, of his earnest desire to see me, and of the solace he expected me to afford him. He entered at some length into what he conceived to be the nature of his malady. It was, he said, a constitutional and a family evil, and one for which he despaired to find a remedy. A mere nervous affection, he quickly added, which would undoubtedly soon pass off. It displayed itself in a host of unnatural sensations. Some of these, as he detailed them, interested and bewildered me, although perhaps the terms and the general manner of the narration had their weight. He suffered much from a morbid acuteness of the senses. The most insipid food was alone endurable. He could wear only garments of certain texture. The odors of all flowers were oppressive. His eyes were tortured by even a faint light, and there were but peculiar sounds, and these from stringed instruments, which did not inspire him with horror. To an anomalous species of terror, I found him a bounden slave. "I shall perish," said he. "I must perish in this deplorable folly. Thus, and not otherwise shall I be lost. I dread the events of the future, not in themselves, but in their results. I shudder at the thought of any, even the most trivial incident, which may operate upon this intolerable agitation of soul. I have indeed no abhorrence of danger, except in its absolute effect, in terror. In this unnerved, in this pitiable condition, I feel that the period will sooner or later arrive when I must abandon life and reason together in some struggle with the grim phantasm, fear." I learned, moreover, at intervals, and through broken and equivocal hints, another singular feature of his mental condition. He was enchained by certain superstitious impressions in regard to the dwelling which he tenanted, and whence for many years he had never ventured forth, in regard to an influence whose supposititious force was conveyed in terms too shadowy here to be restated, an influence which some peculiarities in the mere form and substance of his family mansion had, by dint of long sufferance, he said, obtained over his spirit. An effect which the physique of the grey walls and turrets, and of the dim tarn into which they all looked down, had at length brought upon the morale of his existence. He admitted, however, although with hesitation, that much of the peculiar gloom which thus afflicted him could be traced to a more natural and far more palpable origin, to the severe and long-continued illness, indeed to the evidently approaching dissolution, of a tenderly beloved sister, his sole companion for long years, his last and only relative on earth. Her decease, he said with a bitterness which I can never forget, would leave him the hopeless and the frail, the last of the ancient race of the Ushers. While he spoke, the Lady Madeline, for so she was called, passed slowly through a remote portion of the apartment, and without having noticed my presence, disappeared. I regarded her with an utter astonishment not unmingled with dread, and yet I found it impossible to account for such feelings. A sensation of stupor oppressed me as my eyes followed her retreating steps. When a door at length closed upon her, my glance sought instinctively and eagerly the countenance of the brother, but he had buried his face in his hands, and I could only perceive that a far more than ordinary wanness had overspread the emaciated fingers through which trickled many passionate tears. The disease of the Lady Madeline had long baffled the skill of her physicians. A settled apathy, a gradual wasting away of the person, and frequent although transient affections of a A settled apathy, a gradual wasting away of the person, and frequent although transient affections of a partially cataleptical character were the unusual diagnosis. Hitherto she had steadily borne up against the pressure of her malady, and had not betaken herself finally to bed, but on the closing in of the evening of my arrival at the house, she succumbed, as her brother told me at night with inexpressible agitation, to the prostrating power of the destroyer, and I learned that the glimpse I had obtained of her person would thus probably be the last I should obtain, that the lady, at least while living, would be seen by me no more. For several days ensuing, her name was unmentioned by either Usher or myself, and during this period I was busied in earnest endeavors to alleviate the melancholy of my friend. We painted and read together, or I listened, as if in a dream, to the wild improvisations of his speaking guitar. And thus, as a closer and still closer intimacy admitted me more unreservedly into the recesses of his spirit, the more bitterly did I perceive the futility of all attempt at cheering a mind from which darkness, as if an inherent positive quality, poured forth upon all objects of the moral and physical universe in one unceasing radiation of gloom. I shall ever bear about me a memory of the many solemn hours I thus spent alone with the master of the House of Usher. Yet I should fail in any attempt to convey an idea of the exact character of the studies, or of the occupations in which he involved me, or led me the way. An excited and highly distempered ideality threw a sulphurous luster over all. His long, improvised dirges will ring forever in my ears. Among other things, I hold painfully in my mind a certain singular perversion and amplification of the wild air of the last waltz of von Weber. From the paintings over which his elaborate fancy brooded, and which grew, touch by touch, into vagueness at which I shuddered the more thrillingly, because I shuddered knowing not why. From these paintings, vivid as their images now are before me, I would in vain endeavor to adduce more than a small portion which should lie within the compass of merely written words. By the utter simplicity, by the nakedness of his designs, he arrested and overawed attention. If ever mortal painted an idea, that mortal was Roderick Usher. For me, at least, in the circumstances then surrounding me, there arose out of the pure abstractions which the hypochondriac contrived to throw upon his canvas an intensity of intolerable awe, no shadow of which felt I ever yet in the contemplation of the certainly glowing, yet too concrete reveries of Fuseli. One of the phantasmagoric conceptions of my friend, partaking not so rigidly of the spirit of abstraction, may be shadowed forth, although feebly, in words. A small picture presented the interior of an immensely long and rectangular vault or tunnel, with low walls, smooth white, and without interruption or device. Certain accessory points of the design served well to convey the idea that this excavation lay at an exceeding depth below the surface of the earth. No outlet was observed in any portion of its vast extent, and no torch or other artificial source of light was discernible, yet a flood of intense rays rolled throughout, and bathed the whole in a ghastly and inappropriate splendor. I have just spoken of that morbid condition of the auditory nerve which rendered all music intolerable to the sufferer, with the exception of certain effects of stringed instruments. It was perhaps the narrow limits to which he thus confined himself upon the guitar, which gave birth in great measure to the fantastic character of his performances. But the fervid facility of his impromptus could not be so accounted for. They must have been, and were, in the notes as well as in the words of his wild fantasias, for he not unfrequently accompanied himself with rhymed verbal improvisations. The result of that intense mental collectedness and concentration, to which I have previously alluded as observable only in particular moments of the highest artificial excitement. The words of one of these rhapsodies I have easily remembered. I was perhaps the more forcibly impressed with it as he gave it because, in the under or mystic current of its meaning, I fancied that I perceived, and for the first time, a full consciousness on the part of Usher of the tottering of his lofty reason upon her throne. The verses, which were entitled The Haunted Palace, ran very nearly, if not accurately, thus. In the greenest of our valleys, by good angels tenanted, once a fair and stately palace, radiant palace, reared its head. In the monarch thought's dominion, it stood there, never seraph spread opinion over fabric half so fair. Banners yellow, glorious golden, on its roof did float and flow. All this was in the olden time long ago, and every gentle air that dallied in that sweet day, along the ramparts plumed and pallid, a winged odor went away. Wanderers in that happy valley through two luminous windows saw spirits moving musically to a lute's well-tuned law. Round about a throne were sitting Porphyrogene, in state his glory well befitting, the ruler of the realm was seen. And all with pearl and ruby glowing was the fair palace door, through which came flowing, 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 and sparkling evermore, a troop of echoes whose sweet duty was but to sing, in voices of surpassing beauty, the wit and wisdom of their king. But evil things, in robes of sorrow, assailed the monarch's high estate. Ah, let us mourn, for never morrow shall dawn upon him, desolate. And round about his home the glory that blushed and bloomed is but a dim remembered story of the old time entombed. And travelers now within that valley, through the red litten windows see vast forms that move fantastically to a discordant melody, while like a rapid ghastly river, through the pale door, a hideous throng rush out forever, and laugh, but smile no more. I well remember the suggestions arising from this ballad led us into a train of thought wherein there became manifest an opinion of Usher's, which I mention not so much on account of its novelty, for other men have thought thus, as on account of the pertinacity with which he maintained it. This opinion, in its general form, was that of the sentience of all vegetable things. But in his disordered fancy, the idea had assumed a more daring character, and trespassed under certain conditions upon the kingdom of inorganization. I lack words to express the full extent or the earnest abandon of his persuasion. The belief, however, was connected, as I have previously hinted, with the grey stones of the home of his forefathers. The conditions of the sentience had been here, he imagined, fulfilled in the method of collocation of these stones, in the order of their arrangement, as well as that of the many fungi which overspread them, and of the decayed trees which stood around. Above all, in the long, undisturbed endurance of this arrangement, and in its reduplication in the still waters of the tarn. Its evidence, the evidence of the sentience, was to be seen, he said, and here I started as he spoke, in the gradual yet certain condensation of an atmosphere of their own about the waters and the walls. The result was discoverable, he added, in that silent yet importunate and terrible influence which for centuries had molded the destinies of his family, and which made him what I now saw him, what he was. Such opinions need no comment, and I will make none. Our books, the books which for years had formed no small portion of the mental existence of the invalid, were, as might be supposed, in strict keeping with this character of phantasm. We pored together over such works as the Vervete Chartreuse of Gresset, the Belphegor of Machiavelli, the Heaven and Hell of Swedenborg, the Subterranean Voyage of Nicholas Klim by Holberg, the Chiromancy of Robert Flood, of Jean de Jean, and of de la Chambeur, the Journey into the Blue Distance of Tieck, and the City of the Sun of Campanella. One favorite volume was a small octavo edition of the Directorium Inquisitorium by the Dominican Emeric de Giron, and there were passages in Pomponius Mela about the old African satyrs and Egyptians, over which Usher would sit dreaming for hours. His chief delight, however, was found in the perusal of an exceedingly rare and curious book in Quarto Gothic, the Manual of a Forgotten Church, the Vigilae Mortuorum Secundum Corum Ecclesiae Maguntinae. Excuse me. I could not help thinking of the wild ritual of this work, and of its probable influence upon the hypochondriac when, one evening, having informed me abruptly that the Lady Madeline was no more, he stated his intention of preserving her corpse for a fortnight, previously to its final interment, in one of the numerous vaults within the main walls of the building. The worldly reason, however, assigned for this singular proceeding was one which I did not feel at liberty to dispute. The brother had been led to his resolution, so he told me, by consideration of the unusual character of the malady of the deceased, of certain obtrusive and eager inquiries on the part of her medical men, and of the remote and exposed situation of the burial ground of the family. I will not deny that when I called to mind the sinister countenance of the person whom I met upon the staircase on the day of my arrival at the house, I had no desire to oppose what I regarded as at best but a harmless and by no means an unnatural precaution. At the request of Usher, I personally aided him in the arrangements for the temporary entombment. The body having been encoffined, we two alone bore it to its rest. The vault in which we placed it, and which had been so long unopened that our torches, half smothered in its oppressive atmosphere, gave us little opportunity for investigation, was small, damp, and entirely without means of admission for light, lying at great depth immediately beneath that portion of the building in which was my own sleeping apartment. It had been used, apparently, in remote feudal times for the worst purposes of a donjon keep, and in later days as a place of deposit for powder or some other highly combustible substance, as a portion of its floor and the whole interior of a long archway through which we reached it were carefully sheathed with copper. The door, of massive iron, had been also similarly protected. Its immense weight caused an unusually sharp grating sound as it moved upon its hinges. Having deposited our mournful burden upon trestles within this region of horror. We partially turned aside the yet unscrewed lid of the coffin and looked upon the face of the tenant. A striking similitude between the brother and sister now first arrested my attention, and Usher, divining perhaps my thoughts, murmured out some few words from which I learned that the deceased and himself had been twins, and that sympathies of a scarcely intelligible nature had always existed between them. Our glances, however, regarded not long upon the dead, for we could not regard her unawed. The disease which had thus entombed the lady in the maturity of youth had left, as usual in all maladies of a strictly cataleptical character, the mockery of a faint blush upon the bosom and the face, and that suspiciously lingering smile upon the lip which is so terrible in death. We replaced and screwed down the lid, and, having secured the door of iron, made our way with toil into the scarcely less gloomy apartments of the upper portion of the house. And now, some days of bitter grief having elapsed, an observable change came over the features of the mental disorder of my friend. His ordinary manner had vanished. His ordinary occupations were neglected or forgotten. He roamed from chamber to chamber with hurried, unequal, and objectless step. The pallor of his countenance had assumed, if possible, a more ghastly hue, but the luminousness of his eye had utterly gone out. The once occasional huskiness of his tone was heard no more, and a tremulous quaver, as if of extreme terror, habitually characterized his utterance. There were times, indeed, when I thought his unceasingly agitated mind was laboring with some oppressive secret, to divulge which he struggled for the necessary courage. At times, again, I was obliged to resolve all into the mere inexplicable vagaries of madness, for I beheld him gazing upon vacancy for long hours, in an attitude of the profoundest attention, as if listening to some imaginary sound. It was no wonder that his condition terrified, that it infected me. I felt creeping upon me by slow yet certain degrees the wild influences of his own fantastic yet impressive superstitions. It was, especially, upon retiring to bed late in the night of the 7th or 8th day after the placing of the Lady Madeline within the dungeon, that I experienced the full power of such feelings. Sleep came not near my couch, while the hours waned and waned away. I struggled to reason off the nervousness which had dominion over me. I endeavored to believe that much, if not all, of what I felt was due to the bewildering influence of the gloomy furniture of the room, of the dark and tattered draperies which, tortured into motion by the breath of a rising tempest, swayed fitfully to and fro upon the walls and rustled uneasily about the decorations of the bed. But my efforts were fruitless. An irrepressible tremor gradually pervaded my frame, and at length there sat upon my very heart an incubus of utterly causeless alarm. Shaking this off with a gasp and a struggle, I uplifted myself upon the pillows and, peering earnestly within the intense darkness of the chamber, hearkened, I know not why, except that an instinctive spirit prompted me, to certain low and indefinite sounds which came through the pauses of the storm at long intervals, I knew not whence. Overpowered by an intense sentiment of horror, unaccountable yet unendurable, I threw on my clothes with haste, for I felt that I should sleep no more during the night, and endeavored to arouse myself from the pitiable condition into which I had fallen by pacing rapidly to and fro through the apartment. I had taken but few turns in this matter, when a light step on an adjoining staircase arrested my attention. I presently recognized it as that of Usher. In an instant afterward he rapped, with a gentle touch, at my door, and entered bearing a lamp. His countenance was, as usual, cadaverously wan, but moreover there was a species of mad hilarity in his eyes, and evidently restrained hysteria in his whole demeanor. His air appalled me, but anything was preferable to the solitude which I had so long endured, and I even welcomed his presence as a relief. "And you have not seen it?" he said abruptly, after having stared about him for some moments in silence. "You have not then seen it? But stay, you shall." Thus speaking, and having carefully shaded his lamp, he hurried to one of the casements and threw it open to the storm. The impetuous fury of the entering gust nearly lifted us from our feet. It was indeed a tempestuous yet sternly beautiful night, and one wildly singular in its terror and its beauty. A whirlwind had apparently collected its force in our vicinity, for there were frequent and violent alterations in the direction of the wind, and the exceeding density of the clouds, which hung so low as to press upon the turrets of the house, did not prevent our perceiving the lifelike velocity with which they flew careering from all points against each other without passing away into the distance. I say that even their exceeding density did not prevent our perceiving this, yet we had no glimpse of the moon or stars, nor was there any flashing forth of the lightning. But the undersurfaces of the huge masses of agitated vapor, as well as all terrestrial objects immediately around us, were glowing in the unnatural light of a faintly luminous and distinctly visible gaseous exhalation which hung about and enshrouded the mansion. "You must not, you shall not behold this," said I shudderingly to Usher as I led him with a gentle violence from the window to a seat. "These appearances which bewilder you are merely electrical phenomena, not uncommon, or it may be that they have their ghastly origin in the rank miasma of the tarn. Let us close this casement. The air is chilling and dangerous to your frame. Here is one of your favorite romances. I will read and you shall listen, and so we shall pass away this terrible night together." The antique volume which I had taken up was the Mad Tryst of Sir Launcelot Canning, but I had called it a favorite of Usher's more in sad jest than in earnest, for in truth there is little in its uncouth and unimaginative prolixity which could have had interest for the lofty and spiritual ideality of my friend. It was, however, the only book immediately at hand, and I indulged a vague hope that the excitement which now agitated the hypochondriac might find relief, for the history of mental disorder is full of similar anomalies, even in the extremeness of the folly which I should read. Could I have judged, indeed, by the wild, overstrained air of vivacity with which he hearkened, or apparently hearkened, to the words of the tale, I might well have congratulated myself upon the success of my design. I had arrived at that well-known portion of the story where Ethelred, the hero of the tryst, having sought in vain for peaceable admission into the dwelling of the hermit, proceeds to make good an entrance by force. Here, it will be remembered, the words of the narrative ran thus. "And Ethelred, who was by nature of a doughty heart, and who was now mighty withal, on account of the powerfulness of the wine which he had drunken, waited no longer to hold parley with the hermit, who, in sooth, was of an obstinate and maliceful turn, but feeling the rain upon his shoulders, and fearing the rising of the tempest, uplifted his mace outright, and with blows made quickly room in the plankings of the door for his gauntleted hand. And now, pulling therewith sturdily, he so cracked and ripped and tore all asunder, that the noise of the dry and hollow-sounding wood alarumed and reverberated throughout the forest." At the termination of this sentence I started, and for a moment paused, for it appeared to me, although I at once concluded that my excited fancy had deceived me, it appeared to me that from some very remote portion of the mansion, there came, indistinctly to my ears, What might have been, in its exact similarity of character, the echo, but a stifled and dull one certainly, of the very cracking and ripping sound which Sir Launcelot had so particularly described. It was, beyond doubt, the coincidence alone which had arrested my attention, for amid the rattling of the sashes and the casements and the ordinary commingled noises of the still increasing storm, the sound in itself had nothing, surely, which should have interested or disturbed me. I continued the story. But the good champion Ethelred, now entering within the door, was sore enraged and amazed to perceive no signal of the maliceful hermit, but in the stead thereof a dragon of a scaly and prodigious demeanour, and of a fiery tongue, which sate in guard before a palace of gold, with a floor of silver, and upon the wall there hung a shield of shining brass, with this legend enwritten: Who entereth herein a conqueror hath been, who slayeth the dragon, the shield he shall win. And Ethelred uplifted his mace, and struck upon the head of the dragon, which fell before him, and gave up its pesty breath, with a shriek so horrid and harsh, and withal so piercing, that Ethelred had feigned to close his ears with his hands against the dreadful noise of it, the like whereof was never before heard. Here again, I paused abruptly, and now with a feeling of wild amazement, for there could be no doubt whatever that, in this instance, I did actually hear, although from what direction it proceeded I found it impossible to say, a low and apparently distant, but harsh, protracted, and most unusual screaming or grating sound, the exact counterpart of what my fancy had already conjured up for the dragon's unnatural shriek, as described by the romancer. Oppressed as I certainly was upon the occurrence of the second and most extraordinary coincidence, by 1,000 conflicting sensations in which wonder and extreme terror were predominant, I still retained sufficient presence of mind to avoid exciting, by any observation, the sensitive nervousness of my companion. I was by no means certain that he had noticed the sounds in question, although assuredly a strange alteration had, during the last few minutes, taken place in his demeanour. From a position fronting my own, he had gradually brought round his chair, so as to sit with his face to the door of the chamber, and thus I could but partially perceive his features, although I saw that his lips trembled as if he were murmuring inaudibly. His head had dropped upon his breast, yet I knew he was not asleep, from the wide and rigid opening of the eye as I caught a glance of it in profile. The motion of his body, too, was at variance with this idea, for he rocked from side to side with a gentle yet constant and uniform sway. Having rapidly taken note of all this, I resumed the narrative of Sir Launcelot, which thus proceeded. And now the champion, having escaped from the terrible fury of the dragon, bethinking himself of the brazen shield, and of the breaking up of the enchantment which was upon it, removed the carcass from out of the way before him, and approached valorously over the silver pavement of the castle, to where the shield was upon the wall. Which in sooth tarried not for his full coming, but fell down at his feet upon the silver floor, with a mighty, great, and terrible ringing sound. No sooner had these syllables passed my lips, than, as if a shield of brass had indeed, at the moment, fallen heavily upon a floor of silver, I became aware of a distinct, hollow, metallic, and clangorous, yet apparently muffled reverberation. Completely unnerved, I leaped to my feet, but the measured rocking movement of Usher was undisturbed. I rushed to the chair in which he sat. His eyes were bent fixedly before him, and throughout his whole countenance there reigned a stony rigidity. But as I placed my hand upon his shoulder, there came a strong shudder over his whole person, a sickly smile quivered about his lips, and I saw that he spoke in a low, hurried, and gibbering murmur, as if unconscious of my presence. Bending closely over him, I at length drank in the hideous import of his words. Not hear it. Yes, I hear it, and have heard it. Long, many minutes, many hours, many days have I heard it, yet I dared not. Oh, pity me, miserable wretch that I am. I dared not speak. We have put her living in the tomb. Said I not that my senses were acute? I now tell you that I heard her first feeble movements in the hollow coffin. I heard them many days ago, yet I dared not speak. And now, tonight, Ethelred, the breaking of the hermit's door, and the death cry of the dragon, and the clangor of the shield. Say, rather, the rending of her coffin, and the grating of the iron hinges of her prison, and her struggles within the coppered archway of the vault. Oh, whither shall I fly? Will she not be here anon? Is she not hurrying to upbraid me for my haste? Have I not heard her footstep on the stair? Do I not distinguish that heavy and horrible beating of her heart? Madman! Here he sprung furiously to his feet and shrieked out his syllables as if in the effort he were giving up his soul. Madman! I tell you that she now stands without the door! As if in the superhuman energy of his utterance there had been found the potency of a spell, the huge antique panels to which the speaker pointed there slowly back upon the instant their ponderous and ebony jaws. It was the work of the rushing gust, but then without those doors there did stand the lofty and enshrouded figure of the Lady Madeline of Usher. There was blood upon her white robes, and the evidence of some bitter struggle upon every portion of her emaciated frame. For a moment she remained trembling and reeling to and fro upon the threshold, then with a low moaning cry, fell heavily inward upon the person of her brother, and in her violent and now final death agonies, bore him to the floor a corpse, and a victim to the terrors he had anticipated. From that chamber and from that mansion I fled aghast. The storm was still abroad in all its wrath as I found myself crossing the old causeway. Suddenly there shot along the path a wild light, and I turned to see whence a gleam so unusual could have issued, for the vast house and its shadows were alone behind me. The radiance was that of the full setting and blood-red moon, which now shone vividly through that once barely discernible fissure, of which I have before spoken as extending from the roof of the building in a zigzag direction to the base. While I gazed, this fissure rapidly widened. There came a fierce breath of the whirlwind. The entire orb of the satellite burst at once upon my sight. My brain reeled as I saw the mighty walls rushing asunder, and there was a long, tumultuous shouting sound like the voice of 1,000 waters. And the deep and dank tarn at my feet closed sullenly and silently over the fragments of the House of Usher.
Spooky.
If you're waiting for more, there isn't.
Nice.
Nothing left, folks. Also, hi, Maxie.
Hello, Maxie!
Hi to you all. And hi to the lady of the house.
Yeah. She's been dying to meet you. See, it's funny because death. Woo!
So,
Ho writes a lot of words.
yeah.
He's still easier to read than Lovecraft. You did it to yourself.
Duh.
Now we have like 20 minutes left.
I thought this one would take longer, question? What do we want to do with the last 20 minutes or so?
Why don't you come to my basement and have some amontillado?
Max is all like, "Oh, I have some 20-minute stories. They're down in my cellar."
That's it. That was what it was.
I don't know, Rick. We could start on yours.
We could. Any objections?
Excuse me.
No, do it.
Go for it. I mean, sure.
I
Okay.
have no
You gotta take me a
objection.
second. You gotta take me a second to set up.
Maxie, I'm curious. Do they do Halloween in Spain? Like, do they do like All Hallows Eve, or what's the?
We have All Saints, which is the 1st of November.
Mhm.
Traditionally, we don't have Halloween. Like growing up, I did not have Halloween. It's very much a thing now. Because like globalization. But it's I'm like not particularly of a spooky mind.
That's right. I'm just curious because I love hearing about like other cultures and stuff.
Yeah, no, it was more of a religious holiday here. Like on the 1st, we'd go to the cemetery to tend to our family's graves and stuff like that. But yeah, not spooky. Not spooky at all.
Huh. Interesting.
Isn't it though?
So
No,
was the
I
House
do.
of Usher the sequel to the House of Leaves? Where does the House of Pets fit into the series?
That's the finale of the trilogy.
Yes, you guys can get a read along, but don't read ahead. Spoilers. I mean, unless you really want to, but I'm going to be reading the entire thing, so. Eventually, not tonight.
I was gonna say.
All right, this thing, God. Remember to hydrate. All right.
Okay, everyone. NES Godzilla Creepypasta, Chapter 1, Earth and Mars. When I was a little kid, the two things I loved most in life were Godzilla and NES games. So naturally, when Godzilla, Monster of Monsters came out, it was like a dream come true. Well, almost. To sum it up, most of the game revolved around getting through very repetitive outer space levels while smashing up tanks and jets, and then fighting against Godzilla's monster enemies. Overall, it was pretty mediocre, but back then I didn't care. When I got the game as a present for my 10th birthday, I played it night and day, as much as I could. Unfortunately, I traded the game for an Amigon a year later, much to my regret, when I found out what that game was like. Recently, I had bought a new NES system, and through a lot of hunting and asking around, my friend Billy finally managed to find a copy of Godzilla, Monster of Monsters. I was pumped to play my favorite childhood game. It never even occurred to me to ask where Billy found it. He also gave me some other games like Legend of Zelda, Bomberman, and some stupid thing called Action 52, but Godzilla had to come first. So I started the game, and the nostalgia came flooding back like a tidal wave. Godzilla's 8-bit theme song flooded proudly through the speakers, and I was soon grinning like an idiot. Some people laugh at me for playing such outdated games, but I've never had as much enjoyment for any games other than those on the NES. Those 8-bit games sent me back to when things were much simpler, more safe. But after what's happened with this game, I don't have those feelings anymore. I had forgotten how quick the fun of smashing things as Godzilla wore off in the scrolling levels. The game bombards you with bullets and things crashing into you from every direction, and you're too big to avoid most of them. Although my excitement had worn down some, it wasn't long at all before I got to my first boss battle. My first opponent was Ghidorah, an obscure squid kaiju who had never been in a Godzilla movie. The most annoying thing about fighting Ghidorah is that he always backs you into a corner and starts smacking you with his tentacle, and you're unable to move until he gets off you. This move doesn't do any damage, but it can stall you until the timer runs out and you have to start the fight over, and he regains some health. It's annoying as it sounds, and of course, he did it when I fought him. Only for some reason, this caused the game to glitch up, because once he started smacking me, he never stopped. The timer is supposed to end the fight in about 40 seconds, but this lasted for nearly 5 minutes. After a while, the graphics started to mess up, with little red blocks all over the place. Which was weird, but I just took the game out, blew on it, then started again. I wasn't about to let a little glitch stand in my way, so I started again, and this time defeated Godzilla and the level's other boss monster, Moguera, without any problems. So then it was to the next planet, Mars. I browsed around the board and found something unexpected. Where Varen's piece should have been, there was instead a piece representing Titanosaurus. There were only 10 kaiju in the game, and Titanosaurus was not one of them. Or so I thought. Perhaps Titanosaurus was originally intended to be in the game, but was swapped out with Varen for some reason. So I began to feel very excited. Not only was I playing my favorite game, but I was playing a prototype of some sort with a new monster. Needless to say, I ran through the levels as fast as I could to see Titanosaurus in action. Fought Godzilla again and beat him before he could do his tentacle smack, but this time the glitch started happening when he died. Godzilla's sprite didn't sink to the bottom, but instead seemed to be devoured by the glitch, and his eyes started randomly spawning all over the screen. I now know that these glitches with Godzilla were my first warning sign that something was very wrong with this game, but I foolishly ignored it and proceeded on to fight Moguera, who this time had a glitch of his own. Moguera was twice as size he should have been, which startled me. He was also considerably harder to beat than usual, which is to say not at all, but soon I had defeated him also, and when he died, yet another glitch happened. This happened extremely fast, so I was lucky to get a screen cap of it all. But what happened was that the giant Moguera sprite started to shatter and melt. Also, if you look at the garbled text at the right corner of the screen, you'll notice what appears to be a bird in a cage. I still have no idea what that meant. At this point, I was about to fight Titanosaurus, and I was worried as to what kind of glitches would happen this time. But to my surprise, Titanosaurus looked just fine. Although all the game's bipedal monsters were the same height, Titanosaurus was a bit taller. But since Titanosaurus actually was taller than Godzilla in his film debut, I thought this was kinda cool. After a very fun fight with a monster that wasn't supposed to be in the game, I took over the enemy base and proceeded not to Jupiter like normal, but instead to Pathos. Chapter 2, Pathos. Pathos was the same as Jupiter in layout, except the board was dark blue rather than green. First thing I noticed was that all the usual level icons had been replaced by a blue rock and some kind of orange honeycomb shape. There was one icon that had part of the jungle icon shape, but I didn't pay much thought to it. I checked the other side of the board to see the new monster. Instead of Hedorah, it was Biollante. But that couldn't have been right. Godzilla vs. Biollante didn't come out until 1989, and this game was made in 1988. Perhaps Toho put Biollante in the game to build excitement for the movie next year, but changed their minds? I tried to rationalize the game's abnormalities any way I could, but this would prove to be futile. Pathos' Map song was the first new song I heard in the game. Like most of the new songs, it was hard to describe. I'll try. It started out slow and suspenseful, much slower than any song in the game. But every 12 seconds or so, there would be a loud clashing sound and the tempo changed. It was like the composer randomly played parts from 5 different songs with the same instruments. I moved Godzilla over to one of the many blue rock icons that had replaced the jungle icon and started the level. The level resembled a blue mountain range with a blood-red planet in the sky. There was something odd about the mountains. They had a shredded paper look to them. I thought at first maybe the glitch had affected it, but it looked far too intentional. I quickly noticed something else about this new level. There were no enemies, at all. Not even any obstacles. I should also mention that this was where the point meter started to become glitched beyond comprehension. But it didn't bother me much, I never kept up with game points. So, without having anything to focus on, I listened to the music while walking through the level unopposed. The music had a sorrowful feel to it. It would have been rather pleasant had I heard it in a normal game. The level went on for 3 screens, but with no obstacles around, I finished it very quickly. I tried other levels of the same type to see if any enemies appear, but there were none. There was little else to be seen in the Blue Mountains, so I tried the other level type. I started one of the orange levels, and my eyes were assaulted with a grotesque background of tumorous orange eyes. The sky was the same as the ground, so I assumed the game was indicating that this level takes place in a cave. The only enemies here were Matango spawn, but as you can see, the little bastards were everywhere. The music certainly didn't help, with a mixture of screeching sounds and loud drum beats that sounded like a monster's theme in a horror film. After completing it, I tried to avoid playing through any more of these levels wherever I could. The map was short, so it was only a few minutes before I was headed toward a rematch with Godzilla and Muguera. But this time, their sprites and attack patterns were vastly different. I fought Muguera first. Muguera's replacement was a flying machine with a slight resemblance to Pascagoula alien. It was a bit like fighting Mothra, only it moved with a lot more grace. It attacked by spinning its front tentacles like a corkscrew, and it had an I-beam, except now it fired from the drill. This lanky aberration had replaced Godzilla, and the new beast was more of a challenge. It would run and jump at a fast pace, constantly swinging its arms around, making it hard to get close, and of course, it tried to pin me in the corner with as much annoying resolve as ever. I defeated it using a combination of tail whips and heat beam spamming. I defeated them and was going to fight Titanosaurus, but when I started the fight, Titanosaurus was nowhere to be seen. The game simply went back to the map with a Titanosaurus piece now missing. There was no one left to fight now but Biollante, so I eagerly started the battle. I was quite surprised that Biollante started the fight with her rose form. She was immobile and used tentacles to keep me away from the main body, which took the most damage. As expected, she turned into her final form after taking enough damage. The sprite looked pretty damn good for 8-bit. The battle technique was the same, except now Biollante could move, albeit slower than any other monster. Being hit by the tentacles did more damage now, and Biollante could do an acid spit, which I managed to avoid by jumping in the screen cap. Not much more difficult to beat than Titanosaurus, it only took 2 rounds, but when Biollante was gone, the music had stopped, and there was a new icon replacing the base. This icon wasn't there before I beat Biollante. It resembled a red tribal mask, and I had a feeling of dread when I saw it. But since it replaced the base, it must be the only way to exit Pathos. I moved Godzilla to the square and started the level. It was a hellish-looking place with no sky, and a flickering fire in the background. The fire looked far more advanced than anything I've seen on the NES. There was music in the form of a slow, steady drum sound resembling a heartbeat. All the text on the top of the screen and the life bar were gone. In their place was a single bit of text in the middle of the screen that said, "Run." My feeling of dread had intensified. I cautiously walked through the level, but like the Blue Mountains, there were no enemies. I paced around for a minute before thinking, run? From what? The first time it hit me, I didn't even see it. I heard a noise outside my room and turned back to see if something fell, and when I looked back, Godzilla was dying. I figured it must have just been a glitch, but I wasn't going to play through the game without Godzilla, so I restarted the game and went to the password screen. Have I ever mentioned how creepy the password screen music is? If you played the game, you know what I mean. It doesn't fit at all the mood of the game. It's more like something from a horror game. Maybe they made it like that so kids wouldn't cheat. I was quite annoyed at this point, because I thought I was going to have to fight all the monsters again, but that didn't happen. The game started me off right where I was before I started the red face level. So I tried again, making sure to pay attention this time. That's when I heard a low bellowing sound, and then I saw it. This thing. Do you know that feeling your body has when you feel like you're in extreme danger? You start to recoil and tense up as the adrenaline flows through your veins, and your nerves start to feel very cold. That's the feeling I had when I took this screen cap. I haven't seen all the Godzilla movies, but I'm pretty damn sure this was never in any of them. It had to be something the creators made up. What kind of sick fuck would put this in a children's game? By sheer dumb luck, or perhaps the adrenaline boost, I managed to run fast enough to get away from it. It ran very fast, so much so that if you saw it, you were almost certainly going to die. And when I say die, I mean your monster gets killed instantly if the creature touches them. Once I had gone back to the map, I was so afraid that I was extremely tempted to just shut the game off and try to pretend this never happened. I couldn't believe what I had just seen. It couldn't have been real. And even if I wanted to continue, I still had to get Mothra through this chase level. But as I stayed inactive on the map screen for a few minutes, my fear was replaced by burning curiosity. What the hell had just happened? What was the rest of the game like? I had only to beat this level with Mothra, and then it was on to the next world. But when I moved Mothra to the red face, the game registered it as me beating the level. I was quite relieved. I tried to prepare myself for the next world, trance. 1 second. Chapter 3, Trance. I was still pretty shook up from the last level when I started Trance. Trance's map music did nothing to erase the tension. As for how to describe it, have you ever heard the theme from Videodrome? That's the closest thing I can think of to compare it to. I checked to see who the new monster was, and it was Orga, a monster who didn't make his film debut until 2000, appearing in a game made in 1988. So much for my theories about Titanosaurus and Biollante. There's no way this game was made in 1988. Those guys at Toho may be smart, but I'm sure they couldn't see that far into the future. If they could, they never would have given Roland Emmerich his rights to make the Godzilla movie. No, this had to be a hack of some kind, which just opened up even more questions. Who made this hack? When? How? And most importantly, why? The why question was the question that bothered me most. My immediate assumption was to think that Billy did this to pull a joke on me, but that couldn't be right either. Billy didn't know how to make a ROM hack, and if he did, he'd probably just do something simple and stupid like replacing all the monsters with crudely drawn genitalia. Unless Billy had amazing game editing skills and a serious dark streak to his imagination that he never told me about, he couldn't have made this. Is it even possible to put a hacked ROM on a cartridge? Aside from all that, my eye was drawn to the new icon on the map, a question mark. I was really curious as to what it did. I'm sure you're also curious, so I'll explain the quiz levels now, since this was when they started appearing. There was one of those per map from here on, and they always appeared near the start of the map. When you start on a quiz level, you appear on a screen like this. As you can see, there's a question at the top, a yes and a no button, and an emoticon in the center. I refer to the emoticon as face, real creative I know, and for convenience I'll refer to face as the one asking the questions. The music for the quiz levels was a track actually in the game. It's the one that plays when you try to use the Ghidorah cheat and get sent to an unplayable level. Face asks you 12 yes or no questions, and you move your monster to the buttons for your answer. When you answer, the questions disappear and Face changes expressions for about 8 seconds, and then he goes back to neutral and a new question comes up. There was no time limit, nor any right or wrong answers. Face has no respect for the player's personal boundaries and will sometimes ask deeply disturbing and personal questions. For example, do you like hurting people? Have you ever killed/raped anyone? Have you been molested by a family member? Other times you would ask questions that were either mind-numbingly stupid, is the sun hot, is water wet, or just flat out ridiculous. Does your dog like the president? And maybe once per quiz, Face would ask you a question about the game. With one exception, Face's expression changes seem to have no effect on the game except for indicating what the game creator thought of your answer. His reactions rarely made any sense, and at first I thought they were randomly generated. The questions never followed a pattern. Face never stayed on the same subject for more than 2 questions. Early on, there were questions that made me think Face was building up to something, only to then ask some stupid garbage. Here are the expressions of Face that I saw while playing. I'll separate them in 2 categories: the expressions I understood and the expressions I didn't. First are the expressions I understood. Neutral, his default expression. Angry, if you try to attack Face, his expression changes to this, but nothing else happens. 3, sad. 4, happy. 5, sick. 6, maniacal. Face made this expression when he was being an asshole. You'll see what I mean later. 7, surprised. 8, love. 9, annoyed. 10, confused. 11, guilty/hurt. And here are the others. 2 of these only appeared once, numbers 1 and 12, and I suspected they may have been in-jokes from the creator. Their respective questions were, do you like ice cream, and are you a tough guy? As for the questions in the first quiz, luckily I had a notepad and pen handy. I have problems remembering things, so I often carry one around to jot things down, and sometimes I doodle in it when I'm bored. So when the first quiz started, I thought I'd record what happened. I'm glad I did. Here are the first series of questions, my answers, and Face's reaction. Quiz 1. Do you like the game? Answer, yes. Reaction, happy. 2. Are you afraid? Answer, yes. Reaction, surprised. Question 3. Are you over 18? Answer yes. Reaction, weird face number 5. Question 4. Do birds have teeth? Answer no. Reaction, love. Question 5. Is peanut butter good? Answer no. Reaction, sick. Number 6. Does the moon rotate? Answer yes. Reaction, weird face number 11. Question 7. Have you had a job? Answer yes. Reaction, confused. Question 8. Do you like hurting people? Answer no. Reaction, annoyed. Question 9. Is the sun hot? Answer yes. Reaction, sad. Question 10. Do you like dogs? Answer yes. Reaction, happy. Question 11. Is the president good? Answer yes. Reaction, weird face number 3. Question 12. Does your dog like the president? Answer no. Reaction, angry. Now that I've explained all that, time for the gameplay. After the quiz level, I tried the new green temple icon first. Wow. Maybe this was why the game was so weird. One of the designers was clearly drugged out of his mind. Jokes aside, I was quite impressed by the graphics of this level, as disorienting as they were. But I hate those creepy, blank staring statue faces. The music had a hypnotic Indian techno vibe to it. There were 2 new enemies in this level, a flying ghost type thing with a trunk and a bat with a horse skull for a face. They appear at random, but I was lucky to get a screen cap of them both. Then I proceeded to a Blue Mountain level, expecting another nice, calm stroll. I took my time walking through, and I was completely taken by surprise when this happened. Not Muguera came speeding towards me and took off quite a bit of health as tentacle screws. It only took me 2 minutes to kill him without having to worry about a time limit, but the boss monsters never showed up in the scrolling levels in the normal game. I was worried as to what the other rules the game would break. After another Blue Mountain stage, it was time to fight Not Varen, whose replacement was one of the most bizarre things in the game. This strange creature attacks you by kicking, and also opening up his chest and firing heat-seeking missiles. I still don't get it. The missiles were sometimes a pain to deal with, but I found out you could tail whip them out of the way. Not Varen was probably the easiest of the monster replacements. The same could not be said for Not Hedorah. Apparently, the source of the horse bats, Not Hedorah was the most aggravatingly difficult monster to fight yet, mostly because of his special ability. He could shriek and summon a small swarm of those horse bat things. I know there's only 2 in the screen cap, but every time he did this, about 10 would arrive. The AI took advantage of the distraction and attacked twice as fast while the horse bats were flying around. Once that annoyance was over with, I went through a green temple level to kill some enemies to restore my health. Interestingly, none of the horse bats showed up after Not Hedorah was killed, and that was when I got an idea. If killing all the monsters makes the red face show up, what would happen if I avoid fighting Orga, go straight to the base? So I gave that a try. Game told me that there was no monster there when I tried to start the base level, and immediately afterward the game took control of my Godzilla piece and moved it in front of Orga. My little trick didn't work, so I tried to prepare myself for another chase. But first I had to beat Orga. The fight with Orga confirmed another thing. Whoever created this game hack was clearly a Godzilla fan. Not only because they picked a monster like Orga, but because they actually implemented something that happened in Godzilla 2000 in a really neat way. Orga's primary attacks were a punch and a heat beam from his shoulder cavity, but once you had him down to half health, he did something new. He would expand his jaws and try to swallow Godzilla, in the process stealing your health and energy. But in doing so, he gave himself a new weakness. Firing a heat beam into his mouth would take a devastating 4 bars off his life meter. With that weakness revealed, I soon beat Orga, and despite how much I had hoped otherwise, the red face appeared on the map where the base was, and the music stopped. I readied myself as best I could. I started the level, and seeing that it was basically the same as the first, I didn't waste a millisecond before I started hauling ass. I soon encountered obstacles in the form of the ground tiles suspended in air. Most of them you could jump over or destroy, others you had to crouch under. About 40 seconds into it, I heard the horrible bellowing roar and saw the spider beast following close behind me. Stacks of obstacles barely slowed it down. It would back up and then charge its way through them, smashing them into bits. And when the smaller obstacles got in its way, it would expand its jaws and swallow them whole. I was afraid, but with fast thinking and faster button pressing, I escaped him yet again. I felt really excited, and so I laughed and said, "Not this time, asshole." I decided to take a screen cap to celebrate. But when I said that sentence, just before the level ended, the monster did something that made my blood run cold. It looked at me. That wave of mortal terror overtook me again, and I sure as hell wasn't laughing anymore. I took another screen cap of the next level title, right before I rushed to the bathroom to splash some water on my face, and to take a piss that I nearly failed to contain when that fucking thing looked at me. So, we're at midnight, chapter 4 next time.
Oh, dang.
Oh no, the video game looked at me. Oh, I'm so scared. I'm so scared, Rick.
Oh, shoot.
I did.
Alright, let's see.
I love that the screen that I see on the stream is just Monster Rick, our icons, and then behind him a black screen with dementia in white text. And that's it. That's it. If someone came into this with no other context, this is what would be greeting them.
Nice.
Do you get
Oscar,
it?
Clip it.
Do you get it? The horror story was about dementia. Oh my god.
No, we're only at chapter 4. This has 8 chapters.
See?
We're halfway through dementia.
I'm impressed at the devotion of whoever wrote this. This is, I mean, just, yeah.
Yeah, there's a lot of dedication to this. A lot of...
Commit to a bit. Always commit to a bit.
Yeah, no, exactly.
Exactly.
Yeah, definitely. Alrighty. So.
Yes, we
Took
rate
a rating.
Duper.
Raid Duper, and everybody give Duper the best.
He's our favorite mama.
And I guess we'll be seeing you tomorrow for more Halloween stuff.
Yes, see you on Halloween night for the rest of Godzilla.
Ooh.
Gojira.
From the depths, 30 stories high. Anyway.
Good night, everyone.
Have a good night.
Good
Good night, everybody.